Graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves.
For allegedly raping somebody, and they didn't. So do you think also we need some restorative work in the prisons in regards to education around rape? Because also we do hear some stories to say people have been raped in prisons because they raped somebody outside, and people are like, oh, we're going to then deal with you or manage you to say you raped a child or you raped a woman, so we're going to rape you instead to get you back for what you did. What's your take on that?
I think generally that is a larger issue of recidivism or reoffending in prisons. And for that, that is an entire body of literature which talks about reducing prison populations, putting them in better conditions. For example, I'm sure you've heard that Norway, Sweden, a couple of these Nordic countries has minimum levels of offending with respect to, I mean, they had to shut down prisons because there were not enough prisoners out there. So we could definitely rely on their literature and being treated better to help them to reduce this criminal offending. As I said, with respect to sexual violence, there was an entire research conducted by a doctoral scholar in the UK, Dr. Madhumita Pandey, who came to Tihar jail in India to speak to. She interviewed, I think, 100 rapists in prison. And her research essentially concludes that sexuality education and gender roles were one of the main reasons why there was this sexual of a lot of sexual offending is arising from there rather than to satiate sexual needs. So I think that was a real eye opener in terms of the things that we need to address with respect to the sexual violence. So I think that is one of the things that we should really take care of more than anything.
Thank you very much for your response. So moving on in regards to your methodology, I think we were trying to touch on that, and also applying for universities. What's your take in regards to how somebody should plan for their journey in regards to the start and to the end when they do get that place, whether conditional or unconditional place?
Oh, okay. So generally, let me first begin by a very generic advice first. So a lot of scholars today, PhD scholars, tend to like. There's a lot of talk going about, and I'm getting a little concerned with the too much discussion regarding, let's say, depression or loneliness or fear of meeting, missing out or burned out among PhD candidates. So I think what will help that is this is a very generic advice. I do understand that individual circumstances could push you in a place where you will not be able to take this ideal situation. But I'm saying this is what an ideal PhD candidate should do. My suggestion would be to, for after you complete your master's degree, to at least give 3 to 5 years, and I'm using on the minimum side 3 to 5 years, working in academic or in a setting for a topic that you're essentially going to take up. The reason essentially why I'm saying that, see, I have been working at a university level from the past 2.5 years, and I'm planning to work for another year before I decide to, apply or take up my PhD studies. So these 3.5 years, I have published, let's say, 3 papers and planning a couple more. I have understand what is it to teach, deal with students, mentor them at the, let's say, the university level. I'm attending conferences to understand how things work. The idea is a PhD. What I see a lot of PhD candidates do is that they will try to enter it based on just academic, let's say, credentials, and then get under the burden of, let's say, doing everything. So they are forced to, let's say, take teaching assistantships. They are forced to become editors of journal. They are desperate to publish papers so that they get employable. And I think that contributes to a lot of stress in their minds. So my suggestion is that when there is a requirement for a PhD application saying that you need to produce original research, doing that, putting a couple of 2 3 papers with respect to your work will not only help you be a competitive candidate, but also it's like, when you're interviewing before a PhD, let's say, panel, so you can say that, sir, ma'am, this is what I have done. This is what is remaining, and this is the part that I'm planning to, inquire into based on the research that I have previously done. So it will make you a much more confident and mentally much more, let's say, helpful candidate than putting yourself in a position, without any work experience, without any papers, and suddenly you jump into what is the most lonely and tough journey of your academic life. So this is what an ideal situation would essentially be. But that is there. As far as the planning is concerned, I would say, based on my experiences, start zeroing in on relevant professors at least 2 years in advance, 2 to 3 years. The reason being that people I have noticed have started planning 2 to 3 years in advance, because suddenly what could happen is that there could be an increase in PhD scholars under their tutelage. They may not be able to take you the same year. They might say that wait a year or two. You should be prepared for that and should not compromise on the faculty or the teacher. And there is also a need for you to calculate the odds of you succeeding at the funding routine that is out there. And I think this is particularly important to keep in mind. So if it's all right, I would like to share a particular slide to talk about how it essentially works. So I'm sharing, apart from presentation, I'm sharing a document where I have managed a framework of application. So this is essentially for the second master's that I spoke about, that I'm pursuing to increase my knowledge. But as you can see, so name of the university, the course, the fees, the application cost, the requirements, ranking. My point is, doing this in a, let's say, in a regulated way really helps you target certain things. So apart from that, so because it's a master's degree, I'm interested to know what modules I'm studying. So I've made a note, and how are they going to be assessed. So it's a 10,000, so LSE, it's a 10,000 word dissertation plus 6 modules, which will have individual presentations on based on those words. So this could essentially help. Plus, I've also had, miscellaneous documents, that is with respect to scholarships, whatever documents will be required for that, as well as any other documents. So essentially, the idea behind sharing these charts is to put you in a focused and in a more, direct way by which scholars could essentially reach out to their to their PhD supervisors and take it up. So that is one thing. Let me just share another document, and this is going to be the fun part with respect to scholarships. Yeah.
I love that document that you've just shared, and thank you very much for sharing, because I think it highlights and illustrates the need to be organized. That's number one. And then number two, to know why you're applying, and also how much effort is required once you start, your master's or your PhD, essentially. So thank you very much for sharing.
You're welcome. So right now I have shared a presentation with respect to the funding at the Midlands for Cities scholarship. So if you can, so as you can see, now why I'm specifically sharing this is for applicants to understand odds or the chances of their, getting a scholarship. Then you need to understand the numbers, because numbers can always, trick. So just understand this. So apart from university funding, which could be generally be rare, you have to apply for the Humanities Research Council funding. And this says that there are 60 places for this year. Now, let us start working on this 60 number. So for the year 2023, you have 60. And as per AHRC guidelines, international candidates do not get more than 30% of these places. So the exact number that is available to candidates like me, non-UK people, is only 17. All right. And then let's go further on this odds. Let's just calculate that 17 scholarships are being divided with between 8 universities. So that's an average of 2 scholarships per university. And then, as I said, it's even more fun after this. It's an arts and humanities research scholarship, which means not only are you fighting within your own department, but there are at least 8 to 10 departments between which it will be fought. So law, management, sociology, psychology, geography, music. You get the drill. So they're like so 8 to 10 scholarships. So on an average, assuming that they are like let's say 5 to 10 new PhD candidates every year, and 1 or 2 of them will definitely be competitive enough to get funding. So that's like 5 into one university into 8. So it's like 40 people are vying for one place. And I want our listeners to know that there is no quota or a guarantee that your university has some funding which you will get. Because I think in 2 years ago, the Southwest Wales Doctoral Training Partnership, which has universities like in Southwest England, Brighton, Plymouth, Sussex, 5 scholarships of the international that year out of 17 went to Sussex. So some years a particular group of scholars in one university could very well outrank scholars at other universities. So there is no, mandate out there that these 17 scholarships have to be given to, be divided between two scholarships per university. So I'm saying this is how you calculate the odds of what you're doing, and then get an understanding that, okay, that is what I'm vying for. So, so that is what I wanted our, viewers to essentially get an idea of. So I was sharing that. And now talking about one last advice with respect to scholarships. So there are some graduate teaching assistant scholarships which are there at universities of Bristol, Durham, and a couple of others. I suppose it seems to be the new thing. My advice to candidates would be that unless and until it is like absolutely, let's say, gung-ho for you to go for your PhD, I would ask you to avoid these scholarships, because I have had conversations with people who have taken them. Some of them are actually my colleagues at the university, and they say that they eat up a lot of your time. So the deal that you have made is not essentially working in your favor, because you're working like a full-time teacher while doing your PhD. So my point is to always, try to avoid as much as a no bounds scholarship, as they call it. So that would always be the best. But otherwise, as I say, if your circumstances works, so I hope and do pray that works the best. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing. And I think we've had a trend as well in terms of WhatsApp messages, whereby individuals from, let's say, Nigeria and also in India as well, they've been in contact to say, we are in these countries and we want to go abroad, we want to go to the US. The US is on fire, actually. Everyone wants to go there. They're seeking advice in regards to scholarships, the application process, and how to write a proposal. What advice do you have for those individuals?
So my advice is first to have an understanding what does a scholarship even mean in those countries, because I have had a couple of colleagues. It was like very amusing when they essentially got to know. So let me just give an example of this, and this is the good thing. In UK, Canada, and a couple of other places, the word scholarship implies that you sit at home and we are recognizing your potential, and you do your work. We are funding you. In Europe, the meaning of a scholarship is that there is a larger, let's say, the funding is for the bigger professor with 2 decades of work. He is, let's say, working on prisoners' issues in prison in Germany. All right, this is how Max Planck essentially works. It's the most famous research scholarship in the US. We are giving you a job as his research assistant, which will be as good as working paying job. And in lieu of that you're working, you can complete your scholarship under that person, where you will be working on your own project related to the main supervisor. So let's say if my project was prison conditions in India, and since he's already doing it in Germany, so the theory remains the same, the empirical part will essentially change. So that's the way it works in Europe. In US, you have to be very careful, because US, for some reason, and I'm talking about the PhD scholarships, funding is only given for the fees. All right. The living expense is only paid in, I think it is only paid in the first year and in the final year of your PhD or something like that. There's limited funding. The remaining time you are expected to either pay on your own or take up graduate teaching assistantships and other avenues to pay for your living expense. Now, that is a proposition that you need to very well keep in mind while you decide to take up those relevant scholarships. So that is there. For example, Canada could be another place that tends to have this concept. So what happened in Canada was they gave me an offer of PhD place in a university and says, congratulations, we are giving you 25,000 dollars funding. And then I get to know that the $9,000 of fees has to be paid out of those 25,000. So my scholarship technically was 16,000. And the living expense calculated by the university, this is another tricky area, is at least 25,000 pounds per year. But as per the university, and I'll tell you why the issue is there. They calculated it at like 15 or 12 or something, and I'll tell you how they get that number. According to the university, the way you should live is, one person living in an apartment with six people, and your room is also not private, not to mention the shared bathroom. and this one, or they could be a bathroom for the entire floor at the end of the line, like typically living like in hostels and in undergraduates. So I'm just saying that be careful of the amounts they have calculated, the way in which they are deducting things, and what is the application of that scholarship on the ground. So I just want candidates to be very careful as to fully understand that how is it going to work out there, rather than just rush. Okay, I got a scholarship, great, my work is done, I should pursue this course. I'm saying have an understanding what does that scholarship even mean. So that is there.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And I think sometimes we're so excited to receive the offer that we don't actually look into how does it work, what are the pros, what are the cons, etc. Now, going back to what we've been discussing then, what's your thoughts on equality and diversity in terms of the education space? Do you think women have the same opportunities and salaries? Do you think we need more inclusivity and we need to regroup and start again? What are your thoughts on that?
I believe there's definitely a great need for inclusivity and diversity and other things that are, opportunities for inclusion. Not only because, as I mentioned earlier, that it brings new perspectives into our, thought process, but even if I were to think of it like an economist, I don't see any particular reason for us to lose out on those talents of other individuals, their perspectives, their new ideas that are essentially out there. Though I will agree that things could be a little more difficult for them, because for what it's worth, I have noted that there is some sort of, the halo effect. So, people assume good things about things that are most relatable to them, and, could appear in a certain way. So the thing is, I must confess, Nova, that earlier I used to be, let's say, burdened by the same idea that all of my success is a result of my hard work. But after many years of being in the academic space, being as I say, growing up, I have recently crossed my 30th birthday last year. So with age, as we
Happy
say,
birthday.
thank you. So with age comes wisdom, and I have come to the realization that my success is largely, at least 50%, attributed to, let's say, privileges out of gender, out of sexuality, being a cisgender heterosexual man in a society that privileges those qualities. Definitely the effect on my mental health and on my opportunities is disproportional to what it is to other individuals. So I believe that I have made efforts, and the society and individuals should also make efforts to make it a more inclusive space. I think that is something that is definitely needed.
Oh, wow. I love your response. And I have to say, it takes a lot for somebody to be quite reflective and to identify that actually it is true, there is gender inequality. Because I think I've had somebody say, well, women should really work hard and push and they'll be successful like men. And it made me think in terms of that response. So thank you very much for your response. And the second question is in regards to, do you think attaining a certificate in higher education breaks the poverty cycle, or do you think actually getting a master's or a postgrad diploma or a PhD, postdoc, it doesn't matter anymore? The opportunities, they're next to none. It doesn't work. What are your thoughts?
Well, any form of formal education definitely helps. I don't want to just take a strawman argument and dismiss its value. But what I would definitely notice, and that is what I've seen over a period of time, is that the distance between formal education and training and between what is actually required is essentially not out there. And I think we need to give people time, energy, and efforts to essentially build those qualities. I remember speaking to a potential supervisor at Nottingham, and he said that if I were you, my supervisor said, do not write a paper in the first 5 years of you being an academic. That is obviously not possible today, because your thinking matures with time. With time your ideas mature. But I strongly feel that if you have to take up those certain opportunities that you are essentially looking for out there, My suggestion would be to not only give it time, but I think mentoring is a very important part of working out today. Today, let's say I am doing well, I'm working, I've got a lot of good research papers out. I will owe a lot of that to one of my mentors at the university, Dr. Khagesh Gautam. So who has been very kind in his time and efforts, in guiding me at every step. So I think mentorship is quite an important part of that journey, and you have to be really lucky to find a mentor who will help you out there without looking for an extra agenda. In fact, if I may say this out, since we are discussing PhD applications, I think it is important for PhD scholars to ask this question, and I would say don't be afraid. Do ask this specific question to your supervisor. Are you looking for me any specific, let's say, contribution from my end? Because there could be, I do remember getting a supervisor who said that I'm expecting you to work in this research center and contribute to it. Or some who might say that I'm looking to write some papers with you. I think it's very important to have that kind of conversations and be upfront about it, because if you feel that is too much work, because I did feel that, okay, I want to focus only on my PhD, it could lead to resentment and issues with somebody who is going to be a major part of your life journey. So my suggestion to scholars will be to be as upfront and as open about it. You may lose somebody who might be helpful, but it is better to part ways than to essentially regret it later.
No, I think I love your response, and thank you very much, because I do get questions in regards to going for my PhD interview. How should I present myself, and what questions should I ask? And I think that is really important to try and understand what the expectations are and what the reality will look like if you were to be accepted, and then you can make a well-informed decision. Like you said, you don't want to be resentful later when the expectations are being shared after you've accepted and started the program, essentially. So thank you very much. The last question you'd be glad to know is, what are your thoughts on PhD Hard Talk? I mean, you've been a guest twice now, so I'd like to think they're positive. And what do you think we could do better in regards to PhD Hard Talk?
Well, it's definitely a wonderful concept, Noma, to have a place where people could share ideas and discuss their journeys. I think it's very important, especially when you're feeling a little lonely and, you could listen to other people talk about their problems. It's really helpful at times. I think the only way you could make it better is by, having, let's say, panels by which people could choose speakers based on their subject. So let's say if I'm talking about law as a PhD, people who want to take it up music or management or other things could essentially scroll down to look for interviews specifically of the peoples from their areas. So I think that would really help in increasing the brilliant work that you're doing here, and it would really help a lot of candidates in terms of reaching the relevant people they feel are of their field. So I think that is what would there. Otherwise, I would say as great as it could get. So
Thank you very much. That is really good, and it's something that we haven't thought of. So thank you very much for sharing and for being honest with us. And if people do want to get in contact with you, sir, where can they find you?
I think LinkedIn would be the best mechanism for me to get in touch with, because it keeps it professional, and at the same time I'm able to interact with people with the, let's say, regulation of my personal space. Plus, I think my email ID is usually mentioned in every research paper that I have written, so they could reach out to me through my official email. I would be happy to guide people in whatever way I can.
And thank you very much for sharing. So remember, this is PhD Hard Talk. And if you do want to find out a bit more about Nikunj, all his details are at the bottom, his LinkedIn details, and also I think Twitter, and also his email address. And if you do want to read his paper, the link is at the bottom in regards to his publication. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And remember, hashtag Project Dissemination to the world and hashtag Sustainable Knowledge to the world. And please do share, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and hopefully we can push the movement in terms of sharing the knowledge. Thank you so much, Nikunj, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming here. And I hope all for the PhD applications, I hope all your dreams come true of joining an amazing PhD project with all funding and as much as you want. All all the way.